And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Dreams Money Show, where we'll be discussing the finance in the digital age. My name is Michael Mataluni, and I'm joined today by Ted McGrath. If you don't know Ted, he's created 5 household brands and teaches.
Michael, we can't hear you. You just went on mute, man.
You guys lose me? Are we back?
You're back.
Weird. All right. So, Ted, welcome. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to do this with you. Yeah, let's talk about finance in the digital age. What inspired you to get on this path?
I got on the path. I think, most people heard about, this 5 years ago or so when Bitcoin was kind of surging in 2017. And so, of course, I paid attention to what was going on. And so that's initially what sparked my interest in it. Then I looked into some other avenues rather than just buying the coins, such as mining, which is really just validating the transactions when people, purchase Bitcoin on the blockchain. And so it interested me. And so I initially got in it that way as a miner. And then
I didn't realize you were actually mining.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, for people don't know what that is, like just the simplicity of it. When you go buy Bitcoin, or you could buy other coins too, but in relation to Bitcoin, when you go buy it, you go buy it, and when the purchase is made, the transaction is basically validated by this big supercomputer, and the supercomputer basically solves a puzzle or equation that would be impossible for like a human to solve, to validate that it's a real person and it's a real transaction. And then once it's validated that it's real, it's stored on the blockchain. And the blockchain is just basically, block means ledger. So like when you go and open up your bank account and, you go check your ledger, you see your balances and stuff, block just means ledger. And so when you purchase Bitcoin, it's stored on a ledger. And then there's a whole chain of these ledgers for everybody who's ever purchased Bitcoin. And so, I was one of the computing machines that was mining at the time, and that's how I initially got into it. Unfortunately, electricity costs got so high that the guy I invested with had to shut it down. So we had to shut it down a year and a half into the operation. But we mined some Bitcoin, and that's initially what got me into it. And for those of you that I'm using terminology where you're like, what the heck is Bitcoin? What is blockchain? We can talk about all that in a minute. But essentially, blockchain is a new technology. It's being called Web 3.0. And so we're on Web 2.0 on the internet now. And if you look at this new blockchain technology, you could look at it as the internet of money. So, and that's how I look at it. It's the internet of money today. So that's where we're at.
And where do you see this headed? Like, this is something that you're incredibly excited about. You're very bullish on. You believe that this is the future. Can you give us an idea of where you think this is headed? And obviously, this show is not meant to give any financial advice whatsoever. We're just here to kind of share with you what Ted's strategies are. But I'm curious, Ted, where do you see this headed? Like, what is your vision?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not here to give anybody, advice, financial advice, or to tell you to buy anything or do anything of that nature. I'm just here to share my personal journey and experience with it. And just know anything you do could be speculative and risky. So where do I see it going? I just see like, if you look back and you look in you can hear me okay, right? My mic's okay? Mike?
Yeah, you sound great.
All right. So if you look back in 1997, the internet, I remember where I was at that time. I wasn't even on the internet. I remember in school, in college, they would send you to the library to do these assignments with email. And I was like, email, like, I don't want to get on a computer and open up an email. And like, this sounds complex. And anything that had to do with technology, I had zero interest in. And so I didn't do the assignments and just kind of blew it off. And it was like, email, who cares? Then even in 1999, when I graduated college, and then in about 2000, when I started working with New York Life Insurance, I remember there was like, company email at the time. And and that was also right around the time where cell phones were becoming really popular. I didn't have one in 1999 when I was in college, but after that, the following year, everybody started to get one. And so, so the internet was, popular. And in 1997, there was 150 million users on the internet. And so that's small, right? Comparatively to what today is. And so even when I was at New York Life, I was a slow adopter on email because we would get these company emails and I never paid attention to my computer. I was just like, I had zero desire. And I never even got on. I never even sent an email, never used my computer. I had an assistant who did anything that I needed to do and was never even on my computer. Didn't get used to using a computer until I left New York Life in 2005. This is true. Like never used a computer in 2005. I mean, when I was a kid, I played games on it or whatever, but in my professional career, I never used it. And in 2005, when I left, I got my laptop. I got a laptop, my first laptop, and I started, growing my business using a laptop because you had to be a digital. You had to be like a digital nomad if you're an entrepreneur. But when I was in an office, brick and mortar, day to day, my assistant would send out letters or do whatever we need to do, and to get people to come to seminars, we would send out direct mail. And that was the world. Now there was a whole nother stream of people that were ahead of the curve. I've never been the earliest adopter,
Right?
But when I adopt something, I adopt it quickly because I get it and I understand it. So the internet in 1997 was 150 million people, growing by 67% a year. So if you do the math on that, that's probably something like from 150 million one year to about 245 million the next year. Maybe a little bit more than that, 255 million. That's a huge growth. That's growing by like 100 million a year, right? Well, and that's the internet where you send information.
Right.
Well, the new blockchain technology of what we have and Bitcoin, right, is one of the coins on there. But what makes it superior is the technology that's built on. And Bitcoin, people will tell you the technology it's built on is archaic compared to all the new technology that's coming out in the blockchain. But with that said, the internet of money, which is what the Bitcoin is built on, the users are growing by 113% a year. So the internet, as you put into context, growing by 67% a year back in 1997, where it had 150 million users. The blockchain that now has 150 million users, probably more now because every week or day that goes by is more. But it's growing by 113% a year, which means next year you're going to have 315 million or 330 million. And the year after, you're going to have 675 million. And it's going to go up, 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 and up. So the rate of adoption, right, is twice the rate of adoption of the internet.
That's an incredible statistic. I did not know that.
Yeah. So most people don't know that. So to give them the context, because until you compare one thing to the other, you don't know what a statistic means. Do you really know that, the market cap of crypto in terms of all the supply of crypto, right, that people own that's out there? I think is the market cap. It varies when it goes up and down, but I think it's around 2.5 trillion or 3 trillion right now.
And isn't Bitcoin alone? Didn't it break $1 trillion in market cap?
Bitcoin's $1 trillion market cap. It is. And if you look at, a company per se, Bitcoin is a decentralized organization, meaning there's no one person in control of it, and it was created by it's a computer code. Right, it's a code that was written that now has rules and laws on it in relation to money. But it's decentralized, meaning there's no one person in control of it. Like if you look at Apple, when Steve Jobs was alive, Steve Jobs was in control of Apple. Like Jeff Bezos was in control of Amazon when he was, the CEO of Amazon. He was a central person, and so there was a central person running it. With Bitcoin, there's not a central person running it. Right. So it's called decentralized.
And this is where mining comes in, because individuals are responsible for actually building the hardware that the software runs on, so that no individual is in charge.
Right. And that's also where you and I come in. Like if I told you back in 1997 that you could own a piece of the internet, would you have bought it?
Yeah, knowing what I know now, right? I mean, that's the thing. Most people
No,
are
you
afraid to
could.
adopt new technology. It just takes time.
Right, but you couldn't back then. You could buy like
Right.
domain names, which is a part
Right.
of, so which is something layered on top of the internet, but you couldn't have a
Right.
piece
You
of the
couldn't
internet.
buy, yeah, no.
Today, with like a Bitcoin or Ethereum, you're owning a piece of the internet of money.
Right.
So you're actually owning a piece of it, and that's what people don't understand. So if you were able to own a piece of the internet back in the day, you could be like, well, I'd be a gazillionaire, right? Now today you're able to own a piece of this. What does it mean you'll be a gazillionaire? No. But if you put in enough money, and I'm not recommending that you do, but I've put in enough money to where the opportunity on the upside is tremendous. And even if you put in a small amount of money, the upside is still tremendous comparatively to what you could get in putting it in. So I think your question had something that you asked a question, Mike, and I diverged on it. But what was it?
Yeah, I mean, you really kind of
Oh
did
yeah.
answer it
I know
because
what it was. Hold on, you said $1 trillion. So if you look at the market cap today of Bitcoin, it's probably over $1 trillion, even though the price point is down to 57,000 as we talk. But
I mean, imagine that 57,000 per Bitcoin. I mean, that's just extraordinary compared to, even 18 months ago.
yeah, well, it's also a 200. If you look at gold in the last year, gold has grown by negative 0.67%, and Bitcoin's grown by 200 and something percent. So, Bitcoin has grown by 113% on average, I think, every year for the last 10 years, for the last 10 or 12 years since it's been in existence. It's not a new technology per se. It's been out since 2008. So it's getting on 12, 13 years here in existence. So it's not new.
Right.
And if you look at companies, if you want to compare it to, even though it's not a company because it is decentralized and it's also a totally different technology and what it has to do with the internet of money. But look at the $1 trillion companies that exist today. You've got Microsoft, which I think it took 44 years for Microsoft to hit $1 trillion. You've got Amazon, which I think Amazon took 22 years. Don't quote me on this. Look it up. You've got now Tesla just hit the $1 trillion mark. I don't know how many years it took Tesla.
I bought my first stock of Tesla in 2012, so I think they probably went I think I got it at the IPO, so that might have been their IPO year.
Right, so it might be one of the fastest growing, $1 trillion companies. And then you look at, is Facebook? I think Facebook might be $1 trillion at this point, or maybe it's not. But there's only 5 or 6 $1 trillion companies or networks in the world, and Bitcoin is one of them. So it gives you perspective, and Bitcoin's also being called digital gold, and so it's being called digital gold is because it's not a currency, right? It should actually be called a digital asset because it's treated like property and it's taxed like property, just like that's how it's treated. So and the reason it's not a currency, it's not that you can't use it this way, but you don't walk into McDonald's and buy McDonald's with your Bitcoin. You could, but you really wouldn't want to do that. Just like you wouldn't walk in with a gold bar and you wouldn't, hey, here's I want my cheeseburger. Here's a gold bar. Right. And the reason like gold was considered a store of value, just like Bitcoin is because when you create money and you work for your money in life, you actually want to take that money and you want to actually store it somewhere where the value of your hard-earned money will keep its value stored, right? The value will hold. So gold was this for years and years and years, and people stored their value in it. But gold is also, how many thousand-year-old resource, thousands of years old, and so people are calling Bitcoin digital gold because there's some similarities in it. They're both store of values. Why is an asset worth anything? It's because it's scarce. So things are worth something because they're scarce. And when you compare it to gold, like gold is a finite resource, meaning there's not all the gold in the world. There's not endless supplies of gold. So it's finite. But at the end of the day, the gold is mined by 2 to 3% more every year. So the miners can mine more gold. And if you kind of look at the technology of fracking that came out with oil was more scarce until they came out with a technology to drill down into the earth and kind of split the earth, and it made oil more abundant, right? So as oil became more abundant, even though prices and things are up today, but that's a different issue. As something becomes more abundant, it loses its value, and as you can increase the supply of something every year, it loses its value because it's subject to inflation. So in gold, if they're mining 2 to 3% more gold every year, essentially, if you do the math, in about 88 years, you'd lose all the value of your gold because it's going up by 2 to 3% every year in terms of supply. So when something increases in supply, it actually lowers the value of the asset.
Right.
And the difference between gold and Bitcoin is that Bitcoin has a fixed supply, whereas gold does not have a fixed supply. And with Bitcoin, there's only 21 million coins in existence, and that's all that will ever be in existence. And there's already 18 million of those, 18 to 19 million of those that are already in circulation that people own. So there's only a couple million coins left, you see? And so at some point, the way the computer code's written, Bitcoin will run out and there will be no more left in supply, which means it's fixed and it's totally finite. And then it makes it inflation proof because you can't actually mine more Bitcoin. You can't make more Bitcoin. There's only 21 million that will ever be in existence because that's the way the code's written. And that's what makes it unique and valuable. Not to mention the fact that gold, if you were to transport gold across the world and you wanted to transport $100 million worth of gold, the value of that, you would have to put it on a ship and transfer it across the world. And the shipping cost would cost you $4 or $5 million to do that. Bitcoin, because it is the internet of money, you push a button. I literally did it this morning. It transfers in seconds. Some transactions might take a couple minutes, but it transacts like that.
Right. And that's one of the things I've heard Michael Saylor talk about this as well, about the difference between fast money and slow money, right? So the stored value in gold and having to ship that and having to process that is incredibly slow, whereas Bitcoin, obviously, these transactions are immediate. It's built on the blockchain. It's fundamentally unhackable. Ultimately, there are issues. I mean, we can go into the rabbit hole here, but for the layman to understand, it's virtually unhackable. So the ability of moving smart money allows systems to create things much faster, and that's a really fascinating thing as we enter the digital age, the speed at which these things will evolve society.
Yeah, and it is speed, and just like anything, you have to protect things that you have on the internet, so you have to take precautions, right, to make sure that your stuff is stored safely, and there's ways to do that. But the ability to move things faster, there's no comparison. And let's not forget that, like, you people have a misunderstanding of Bitcoin's price of $56,000, so I can't buy it because I have to pay $56,000 to get one coin. No, you could buy a few dollars worth today.
Right.
So that makes it divisible, right? It's like I could take my Bitcoin of $56,000. Let's say I have a Bitcoin and I have $56,000, one Bitcoin. I could divide it into 56,000 parts and send it to 56,000 parts of the world. Right. I could do that, right? So the ability to break it up, to send it faster than not the speed of light, but to send it quickly, to the fact that it is finite. It makes it a very, very valuable asset. And also to the reality that it can be transferred all over the globe. And, El Salvador has adopted it recently and is now utilizing it in their country because, countries that have weak economies, number one, and the value of their currency is depreciating, they're in trouble. So they need a backup, and they need something that's actually going to hold its value over time. There's certain countries where you go put money in the bank and they charge you interest to keep your money in the bank. So you're seeing a lot of these countries adopt things a lot faster. The dollar, while it's becoming weakened because we're printing money in this country, it still is stronger comparatively to the rest of the currencies in the world. So the dollar is not necessarily going away anytime soon. I think we're seeing an erosion and eventual collapse of it, but the dollar's still here, and it's the medium of exchange that we use. And I think there's some percentile of the number of countries that depend on the dollar, or it's huge in terms of the number of countries that they're connected to the dollar. Something like 80 something percentile. So so El Salvador recently adopted it because they're smart and they're moving into the future. Plus, not to mention third world countries, if you want to send a remittance, a payment back home to your family, and you want to send a check back home, say $100, Western Union takes 15% of that.
Right.
So imagine getting 15% of your paycheck taken if you want to send it back to your family. Like it's very, these things that we know of Western Union, it's like dinosaur age, right? Your banks today are dinosaurs, and you know it just by picking up the phone on customer service. Like if you know nothing about what I'm talking about, pick up your phone and call your bank, and remember the last time you spoke to your bank, how long it takes to get people on customer service, how to make a simple transaction takes you 45 minutes on the phone waiting for somebody. That's dinosaur age, because when you can send an email communication to somebody in seconds, that's the real internet. Well, now imagine sending internet, the internet of money, sending a Bitcoin to somebody in seconds. Now your money is being transferred and handled in seconds versus a 45-minute transaction. Right. So there's really no comparison. If you want to compare it to trends of things that you've seen, because sometimes people don't adopt it because they don't understand it. But most of you didn't believe that Barnes and Noble and things like that were going to become irrelevant in terms of going into a bookstore. And you didn't think that there's be certain locations of certain bookstores that would shut down. And people were still, I like my book, and people still like a hard copy book to a certain degree, but you ain't walking into a bookstore to get it today.
Right.
And books are digital. Music, used to walk in and get CDs. If you were told at the time that CDs were popular, that you'd be downloading your music on your phone, you'd think people were crazy.
Streaming services, television, movies. I mean, it's everything.
All of it. I mean, there's theaters that have shut down in LA, right? Because people don't want to go to the movies anymore. And, the old timers will tell you, I enjoy going to the movies. The younger generation don't care, man.
That's me, Ted. I'm the old timer. I like going to movies.
You know what I'm saying? It's a funny thing, though, if you really look at this, what's going on in the world with us today, it's just an interesting dynamic to pay attention to. And if you're not in the game, and I'm not suggesting you go buy it, I'm suggesting you go learn and research it. I've got hundreds of hours of research under my belt, hundreds and hundreds of hours. And so I understand it. And there's other things beyond Bitcoin that I'm involved in that I'm not going to talk about today because they're very, very speculative, but the opportunity is extraordinary. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I mean, you make this important analogy about the internet and the explosion of the internet and all of these other industries that have gone digital. And now we're seeing the opportunity to do so with money in this, and I think it's important to recognize how the reason we're able to decentralize with a digital currency is because of the blockchain, because it's so secure. So the transactions, you don't need a banker to verify a transaction. It's 100% locked up in the blockchain so that there doesn't need to be these centralized federal monetary systems that control it. And so now you have this decentralized system that gives you the ability to now invest in digital currency. And that's never been something that you could actually invest in the past. You couldn't invest in these sorts of things. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because this is something that Musk was talking quite a bit about. And so when he put Bitcoin on his balance sheet, both his personal balance sheet and the Tesla balance sheet, he was really looking at it as a way to store value. And later on, he came back and said, and this actually tanked the Bitcoin price for a short time, where he said, well, it's using too much energy. But he didn't drop it. And one of the things that Michael Saylor said about this, he said, have you ever done the math on the entire CO2, the entire carbon footprint of the entire banking industry? How much it costs for these people to go to their jobs, how much it costs to run these buildings, how much it costs to move gold across oceans. Like, there's a huge CO2 cost when it comes to the standard model of finance. So I think it's interesting. And I don't think anybody's done that math yet, but I'd be very curious to see it.
Well, yeah, because you have, the costs of, number one, for people to drive to work, right? Number two, the electric bill of all the buildings that exist of banking systems in the entire planet, of what the cost of energy is to run that. Then you're talking about human capital and the resources that's required of human energy to put in, which is totally different than regular energy. But you're talking about a lot of energy to run these systems, right?
Right.
And and today, it is interesting, like, when things happen, when Elon Musk put his money in. But Michael Saylor was the pioneer of the corporate world, and he's one of the reasons why people like Musk got involved, and many other corporations are. So he deserves credit for that. But then you have the people in Bitcoin, because you got Ethereum and you got so many other coins, but you have the Bitcoiners who deserve a ton of credit, who the initial adopters who started this years and years back, and believed in it in 2012 and 2008. So I didn't get involved until 2017. And even when I was telling my friends, I remember when it was in 9,000, when March last year, when COVID hit, I knew what was going to happen with the price. And I told my friends, and I would have sermons, on the patio. On the patio, this one guy and I would argue about gold. He was a younger guy who was invested in gold, and he had people putting money in gold. And I was. It's kind of funny, because I was just like, here, Bitcoin is the future, and here's why it's the future. And people they couldn't have it, because they're like, well, what is it? Like, you can't touch it or hold it. And it's the funniest thing to me when people say that you can't touch it or hold it, because you don't touch or hold your money. Like, nobody uses cash today.
Or their gold. You're not running around with gold.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even have a debit card where I could go to the bank and actually get cash. Like, that would be an impossibility for me. So, like, people don't carry cash today, except if you were born in 1950, and that's just the reality of what's going on in the world. So, like, you when you open up your bank, you see it digitally, and you just trust that it's there. And that's the other reason for this new technology, is transparency. We know that there's been financial institutions that have gotten huge fines for what they're doing with practices in terms of how they're running their financial practices. Massive fines. I won't say who they are. You can look them up. $1 billion fines for manipulating trades. $1 billion fines. And they do it. And so we don't know what's going on with their transactions until they're audited. We don't know we don't know if it's true what they're putting in the book. So one of the benefits of blockchain technology is the ledger, right, that's stored on this, connected to a chain of ledgers. Once it's validated, the transaction, you can't take it off.
Right.
Which is why more and more businesses are going to be moving towards this, because you can have products backed up by this, to where people can't counterfeit products, because you have each product tracked and stored on the blockchain. So there's lots of uses and things that for this technology, and it is a technology, and you're seeing it grow faster and faster. And so if you don't know anything about this space, it can be very confusing, because you have so many new coins, being developed every single day. You could create your own coin. For our new company, where we're raising money, we are creating our own coin. And so we're building it on the Ethereum blockchain. We are going to have our treasury in Bitcoin, and other coins. So there's so much stuff that you look at today and go, wow, it's so confusing. But if you really want to learn one thing, just study the stable thing in the space, which is Bitcoin, and learn about it and understand that. And from there, I think everything else springs up in terms of your education and your knowledge of what you learn after that.
That's awesome. We're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. If you have anything that you want to know about what Ted's working on or his strategy, feel free to ask that question right here. Again, we are not giving any financial advice. This is all about sharing Ted's strategy. Additionally, encouraging you to learn on your own what it is that you want to know, so you can understand the blockchain technology, you can understand Bitcoin, and then other coins as well. So Ted, tell me this. I'm definitely, you and I have been chatting for quite a while about digital currency and crypto and Bitcoin. We've been investing for quite a while. One of my strategies has always been to buy blindly. Like, I avoid the emotional ups and downs, and I only invest what I can afford to lose. And so my strategy has always been to, buy $250 or $500 a month of these different coins without even looking at it, without even looking at the market. Is that something you subscribe to, or do you have a different philosophy?
I so I look at what's going on currently of inflation last year was, the money supply has gone up by 40%. So there's been 40% more money printed in the last year than has ever been in existence in the US. So if you owned, $100, let's say, basically, if you had $100 sitting in your bank account, it pretty much decreased by, let's call low end 20% last year, right? Because inflation is a real thing, and so just by your dollar or your $100 sitting in your bank account, you lost about 20% of your purchasing power last year, right? So that's a big chunk. And if you look at a business, businesses are losing. If a business makes 20% this year in terms of profit, they pretty much broke even, because the CPI came out last month, Consumer Price Index, which is basically it basically marks a whole basket of goods and services that people buy in the economy, and it's typically 1% to 2%. It came out and said 6.2% in terms of the increase of goods and services last month alone. It was a 6.2% increase. So gas has doubled. You go to the gas, it's up by it's up by 50%. So maybe it's hasn't quite doubled. Hotel rooms, if you go on vacation, they're 25% more. This is the reports that are actually officially coming out that for the last year and a half, I've known is happening. Anybody who's studying money and studying and following the trends knows it's happening, but the public's now shocked. And so, to me, the greatest risk is keep putting money in cash. So I look at the perspective of, if I take my cash, my free cash, and I put it into Bitcoin, that's safer. Now people will go, well, it just dropped by 20% because it was at 69 and went down to 56%. Well, yeah, sure, it dropped by 20%, but it also has the upside of what I've done, in the last year, it's doubled the money, and so I'll take the fluctuations, the ups and downs. I wrote it all the way up and then all the way down, all the way up to 64 months ago and down to 30. And I didn't sell anything because I know where it's going in the future. And whether it happens this year or in the next 5 months, because everybody's calling for an increase in there's certain people, not everybody, calling it for a Bitcoin to be at, 100,000 or 135,000, 200,000. Nobody really knows where it's going in the next 5 months, but I do know personally where it's going in the next decade, and that's through the roof. And so you hold on to it, and you put your money into, like for me, I put my money into it because to me, it's not a risk. It's the risk is keeping money in cash. The risk is running a traditional business that's only growing by 20% a year. That's the risk. And I'm looking for new innovations and new ways to do things now, because even the space we're in of digital marketing, it's old. It's old. And there's new things that are coming out, and we need to be on the cutting edge to go, what are the new things? And how do we do things more innovative to where those 20% gains in a year can become 100%? And I'm frantically looking for that right now, just like you guys are, like, scrambling of, like, maybe you're in a job and you're looking to get into digital marketing, which is a smart move because, marketing is powerful and important. But I'm frantically looking to go, hey, if in 5 years, this company's not going to be what it is. In a year and a half, this company's not going to be what it is. So what are the new moves that need to be made to actually turn it into something that is futuristic? So I think you got to be looking at what is true risk today. And for me, true risk is keeping my money in cash. And so, to your question, Michael, yeah, I think you can put away a certain amount of your money per month. But the question is, where do you want to put it? If it sits in cash, you lose it. You're guaranteed. If you put it in, bonds are junk today, right? Not just the junk bonds, but bonds in general, the return's terrible. The S&P did 34% last year, okay, comparatively to Bitcoin at 200 something percent. The S&P standardly does, 10% over a decade. So even that's inflated. Real estate is through the roof inflated. You want to buy property right now, unless you're a real estate expert. I have no interest in buying property. You know, it's up by 27, 30% in different areas that you go to. So I think you just got to look at it and go, what are the things that you know? Well, go get educated on something. But, you know, I made a decision where real estate is not going to be my portfolio. It may be a small portion. But I'm not going to invest in traditional assets, because traditional assets to me, unless you've dominated it, you know it, you're an expert, and you know how to gain from it, that's a small percentage of the population. And the rest of us are sitting there listening, going, hey, you know, financial institutions going, hey, put your money with me and you can earn, 5%, or put your money with me and you can earn 10%, or invest in real estate and you can get 8% a year. Who wants 8% a year? It's garbage. It's absolute and total garbage. So you got to be looking for better ways to do it. And I don't know, like anything else, what is another way to do it? Now, real estate has tax benefits. So by the time you add up the ROI on that, and it has rates of return if you're doing it yourself. But if you're not an expert, you got to go learn it, number one. Number two, you got to get on planes to go to the location and travel and actually go see it with COVID and everything going on. So what's the cost in your lifestyle of getting on the plane, flying somewhere, spending a day and a half to get there, going to look at the property, spending a day on that, spending a day and a half to get back? You're 5 days in to go look at properties that you might not even buy.
Right. Right.
How many hours is that? That's 120 hours, guys. When you could literally be sitting over the next week and studying, 20 hours and getting educated on this and going and seeing if it's the right choice for you, and then click a button and you're in. And then you don't have to do any work. You don't have to deal with tenants. You don't have to deal with nothing, right? So that's assuming that Bitcoin's going to go up over the next decade. Well, it's gone up over the last 12 years, 113% a year. So that's it. And that's my final thing I have to say. No investment advice. Just go get educated is what I would say.
Right. And I think, one of the things that I learned from Warren Buffett, like when I started investing, and this goes for everything I've ever invested in, buy it to never sell it. Like that's the idea, because you're looking to store your value and you're looking to appreciate that wealth. And so, yeah, eventually you may want to sell it, but the philosophy is buy it to not sell. And that's what you were talking about when you were talking about riding the waves. You're like, I don't sell when it's going up or down. I buy and then just ride the long wave. And one of the things Michael Saylor talks about in the future, you'll be able to take out loans based on your stores of value in Bitcoin. So we can get into that on another show. But we did have a couple quick questions. If you could just answer these quickly. Are you mining tokens? We did talk about that a little earlier.
I am not. I was when I first started mining. I invested in mining, and we had machines. So right now I'm not doing that at all. And so yeah, that's the answer to that.
Stan says some of our Canadian banks are nervous about cryptocurrency. Not sure why.
Well, I mean, if you look at, any traditional institution should be nervous because they're going to be put out of business. And, Australia adopted it. They're the first bank that actually adopted offering crypto services to their customers because their customers demanded it. But, look at Hillary Clinton's statement, whatever your opinion is of her. I don't like to give whether I'm a supporter or a not supporter either way. But in 2013, she says, Bitcoin is fake money. And now in 2021, she's changed her statement to go, Bitcoin could destabilize the dollar. And she's telling people basically, and she's not saying that in a good way that Bitcoin's so great it'll destabilize the dollar. Beware that Bitcoin could destabilize the dollar. So now nation states are taking watch of this to go, what's going on? The LA Lakers stadium, crypto.com sponsored it, outside the stadium, it's crypto.com now, $700 million. Walgreens has 8,000 Bitcoin ATMs that are being put in place. AMC movie theaters is accepting Bitcoin for payment. Tesla has it in their treasury. Michael Saylor has it in their treasury. PayPal, Square, El Salvador just announced yesterday they're going to become a Bitcoin nation. Not just doing what they did with giving, I think 3,000 people they gave, or 3 million people they gave Bitcoin to, $30 worth of Bitcoin. So now the state of Wyoming in the U.S. Is moving towards that direction. The state of Miami in the U.S. is moving towards that direction. So I don't listen to the dinosaurs or the institutions. And the question I always have is who's running the institution. I listen to other people, who are smart and who are making moves that seem intelligent to me. If somebody's afraid of it, I ask the question why. And if you were to sit down with Hillary Clinton, my guess is she doesn't even understand what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably sit down and quiz her on it, and she wouldn't understand what it is. And
Or she does, and she's terrified of it.
Yeah, either one. So I think and whatever side of politics you're on, Trump didn't like Bitcoin either. So whatever side you're on, it is what it is. But you just need to make the best decision for you, your family, and also, for the future of society. And I think this is my personal opinion is this is for me. This is what I'm doing. You need to do what you want by researching and studying, getting educated.
Right. And this has been a great conversation and an interesting conversation. There's so much more to talk about. So you're going to be doing this show. So stick around. Make sure if you haven't subscribed, you do so, because you're going to get a lot more of these shows with more experts coming on to share with you the future of digital currency. Ted, what a pleasure it's been to spend this time with you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, I could do this all day, so we'll do this again in the future. And this is my passion. This is a huge I have many passions, but this is one of them. So it's exciting. It's good to be here with you guys, and let's ride the wave.
Thanks a lot, Ted. We'll talk to you soon.